Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of 254 Youth Policy Cafe. Thanks again for joining us, and if you haven't tuned in to our first 3 episodes, please do make sure to watch them after this. We're a team of public policy analysts, and my name is Samantha Luceno, and my team will introduce themselves as well.
I'm Dennis Chalo, and I'm excited about today's show. It will be about education. Thank you.
My name is Boniface Mnene, and I'm excited to be this episode. We are going to discuss about the education and the impact that COVID had on it. Thank you.
So my name is Judith Nguli. I'm excited to be here again talking to you about issues that are quite key to the development of this country. And yeah, today we are talking about quality education in this country. How can we make it better? So please stay tuned.
So by means of an introduction, access to education is a problem not only nationally, it's also a regional priority and even an international priority. So Sustainable Development Goal 4 actually seeks to accomplish some of the following things by 2030. So there's firstly, quality access to primary and secondary education. Secondly, there's access to early childhood development education to smoothen the transition into primary school education. And there's also access to affordable technical, vocational, and university education. So there has been great progress in the sector over the years, with net enrollment at primary school level being at above 90%. We have net enrollment at secondary school level being at about 74%. And we also have very high completion rates at primary school level. So these accomplishments have been as a result of various initiatives. So there's firstly the free primary school education. There's free day secondary education that was introduced in 2008. There's also the rollout of curriculum-based, the competency-based curriculum in about 2018. And more recently, there was a 100% transition. So education, like very many other sectors, has faced a very big blow in the last year as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have seen our students and our pupils and even our students in university level sit at home for the last almost 9 months. And as a result of the envisioned impact that would be there on the sector, the government included the sector in the economic recovery stimulus package and allocated about 2.4 billion to the sector. And so today, what we'll basically be discussing is the economic education recovery strategy that was put forward by the Ministry of Education. And in brief, we will seek to establish whether some of the priorities put forward within that sector and some of those strategies put forward within that particular strategy were implemented. And if they were implemented, were they effective? And if they were not effective, why weren't they effective? So I think I'll just start by going straight into the conversation with my team. So on the onset of COVID-19, I think one major fear and something that we saw in other countries was the education sector was completely disrupted. Students were sent home from school. And of course, we saw that as an eventuality for ourselves. But I think one thing that would be important to maybe ask ourselves and maybe tell the audience is, was this envisioned? Were there strategies put in place to mitigate the potential impact of that disruption? And were these strategies effective?
Yeah, you're right. We were caught up in surprise. It was unprecedented. In fact, for the last 100 years, there's not a crisis that has happened like this one that sees all children from the lowest level to highest level stay at home, and they have to then still continue learning. So it was, for sure, it was really, it was something that we could not predict. But then again, the question is, if we could not predict that, and then does that mean that learning was going to stop because something has happened that has halted kids from going to school, which is a high-risk area anyways? Yeah, so I cannot fault the government. They did pretty a good job. KICD developed an online curriculum whereby kids could learn remotely and through gadgets, of course, phones, laptops, and even through radio stations. And then again, but then if we really true to ourselves, that had its own challenges. And one of the key challenges that presented is the accessibility. With only around 47% of households in this country owning at least one mobile phone, then obviously that means if a household, out of the 47, if the household has like 3 or 4 school-going kids, only one will be able to study. So you can imagine in households where there are many kids and they have only one mobile phone, or even worse enough, the mobile phone is not there. So by and large, a number of kids were left out of learning for the entire 9 months. And this majority of them are the poor and the marginalized. And then even for the ones who accessed, the effectiveness was limited. Because then again, look at a kid who is used to doing direct contact with the instructor, and then all of a sudden they're studying from a screen. Of course, and even that itself also, that was meant for the normal child who can hear, who can see. What then became of the children who are disabled and slow learners? That means also that particular segment of population, school-going kids, were left out. So really, those were two major keys or failure. I mean, there are two major failures of remote learning. But then again, time had to come and kids had to go back to school. So then how do we get to go about that? For the basic education and secondary education, they resumed back to direct teaching, of which, of course, there's a concern about the overpopulation in the classrooms, even though we've been told that Ministry of Health protocols are being observed. Yeah, so then again, we let's talk about our universities, which have really made a milestone in terms of online learning by adopting a blended learning. Blended learning is a situation whereby students can access at least 50% of the modules online and 50% of the modules direct teaching. So yeah, so that is what we have today, and seemingly that is what we might be even proposing for the lower cadres of education.
Wow, those are good insights, Judy. And I think just before even I get to the blended learning aspect, I think we must appreciate that during COVID-19 period, when we had this pandemic with us, a lot of studies were done by different actors. And one key one that I noticed, a recent study that was done by UN Women, which mentioned that approximately 27% of our children who are living in urban areas could not continue learning from home. And about 33% of both boys and girls could not continue learning from home in rural areas. That's a big proportion of our learners. And as alluding to what she has already said, that issues to do with accessing the right infrastructure, issues to do with accessing laptops, computers, and the like, electricity, were major hindrances. However, we also had gaps in terms of the ability of the parents and guardians to be able to guide their learners to learn from home. That notwithstanding, we also had the issues of some of this online content that was shared. While appreciating that KICD, that is the Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development, developed some online content, particularly for grade 1 to grade 3, we must also acknowledge that some private actors also developed some content. However, this is also a concern because was this content actually vetted to be quality material for our children at home? So I think that would be a concern. Coming back to the aspect of blended learning, I think this is something that has taken up particularly in the private schools and even in the universities and colleges. But what is the case with our primary school kids who are in public schools or even secondary schools, which are public schools and probably day schools? Are they having this blended learning?
Actually, I totally agree with you about what you talked about, the blended learning. And this is the way to go. We can't go back. It's like we have to diversify the risk because now we don't know if there'd be another COVID. We are not sure about that. So we can't say, oh, after COVID, then let's go back to our normal learning.
Yeah.
No. We have to adopt the blended learning and move with it. Because this is not a unique case for Kenya. The whole world has found itself here. We are all trying it, and we have no other ways but really to be at the par with the rest of the world, because this is how we are moving.
Yeah.
As my friends have really highlighted it, the main challenge is that we were not prepared for this. I do find that when you talk about the issue of the blended learning, it has a lot to do with the digital learning. It has a lot to do with the electricity. It has a lot to do with the internet. So those are the main challenges that the blended learning is getting. But either way, we have to adopt it.
Yeah.
Because we can't put it's like a farmer going to the market. We can't put our eggs in one basket.
But let me throw a spanner into the works though. When this current government came into power, they said they were going to give every child one laptop, every class one laptop. My thinking as pertains to this, because I mean the main thing that was proposed as a mitigation measure for stopping the avoiding the disruption was transitioning to digital learning.
Yeah.
So my thinking is, if something like that had been implemented at the time, then I think we would be seeing more promising results. I know, Judith, you've been in education for quite a while. So I think you'd be the best one to shed light on, was this actually implemented? Was it actually rolled out? Because, I mean, I think a lot of us are sitting here so many years later, going into 2022, and we're wondering the stories that we were being told.
What actually
happened? You know?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of word in the street about what happened to laptops.
Yeah.
So, and I want to tell you for sure that the laptop project, at least for grade 1, it was implemented, phase 1. And remember, it was going to start from phase 1, like grade 1, then grade 2. In a such following manner. But but even though we needed to be realistic a bit, because then again, the capitation that was put there for per child, if you have allocated a class of 30 laptops for each, I mean 30 is the number, but then the class has like 52 kids. What will happen to the rest of the kids? And then again, remember, this is a laptop that stays in school under lock and key by the headmaster, because that is his role to take care of that laptop. So it's a laptop, yes, but then it's not portable. Okay, it's like a desk.
With that, I think let's jump on to a very important issue now. So as we all know, schools have resumed, and I think one hot topic is the other day, CS Magoha basically told the country that by the way, your students, the ones who don't have room in the classrooms, they can go and learn under trees. Right?
Yeah.
And I think there was uproar from everyone, because everyone was asking themselves, surely you're, like, how can you tell us that we're paying taxes and our children are learning under trees? Earlier in 2020, we had the 100% transition, and we already saw that up to 85 students were being put in a classroom initially equipped for about 42 people. So with regard to infrastructure, I think the country has had an issue, even pre-COVID. I think COVID has only gone to further worsen that situation or expose that inefficiency.
Yeah.
I don't know, let me just throw this over to Boniface, because I know you've done a lot infrastructure related. What do you think about the status of how things are? And were there plans to adapt to this particular situation in the recovery plan?
Thank you. When you talk about education, we can't run away from the issue of the infrastructure. And when you talk about infrastructure, we're not talking only about the physical building. We are talking about the ICT. We're talking about the electricity. So what I could say, I hope I'm not sure that hand or the garment, is really trying, but it's like they're trying to, what we call, putting the cart before the horse. And that's really what we did. Dr. You talked about the digital learning. How do we get that one without electricity? So you find that in our situation, actually we had a difficult in the digital learning because of lack of infrastructure. There was no electricity. If you look at the internet coverage, on average, the rate is around 12.2%. What's that? What's the remaining? Well, that means the remaining 87.8% of the population, they don't have the internet coverage. Again, even I don't want to mention about the electricity. Well, the government has tried in the last mile connectivity and the like in putting electricity, but again, you find that this electricity was mostly going to the households. It was not going to the schools. Yeah, so you find that even connecting the gadget and operating them, it's become difficult. Also, the number of classes, the government in the financial year 2020-2021, they are targeted to construct a number of classes. If I'm not wrong, they set around 1.9 billion for classes. They had intended to have around 250 desks that is assorted. And actually, if you've been keen, you know that the government has been moving to
250,000 desks?
250,000 desks, yes. That's what the government targeted to do. And actually, this, I think, in the process, because and I heard that there have been a construction of some desk somewhere. Actually, the president and the CEO.
But the rumor was never paid. But anyway, that's corridor talk.
Yeah, you know, the government has how it does its things. Yeah, but from the writing, you know, there's what is on the paper and what is action. So I assume that still in the process of constructing those classes as well as the desk. So generally, remember with the COVID-19, we need to have a social distance. And again, as you've noted, is that we were instructed that now the children can learn under the trees. Well, we appreciate it. No, that's actually
but I think
a good...
learning under the trees probably, you know, you are free from air.
No, but you can't say that. Because, like, no, consider guys in Garissa, say, for instance. Utachomeka, you'll... I mean, I feel like it's actually quite unfair for you to even have said that.
Yeah.
I don't know, because, like, I mean, what? Anyway, and then the other day we saw two teachers teaching from one classroom again. You again now start asking yourself, like, so I think this issue of infrastructure, to be honest.
I think things are just worse now. Otherwise, we still saw students or learners learning under trees even before COVID.
Very true.
It's only that we are trying to imagine now that we have COVID. We have to teach 15 in a normal size of a classroom. That would mean that basically we are talking about half of the other class needs to sit outside, or probably they have to do different timetabling to ensure that everybody sits in a class to learn.
And actually, that's not the issue. The issue is nobody knows when COVID is running away. So imagine during the rainy season, what happens? Do we stop learning? So
exactly, that's the thing.
As much as we appreciate that people can learn under the trees, we need to be doing something. We need to, let's assume there's now just a temporary solution as we look for a permanent solution. That is construction of classes so that we can accommodate all the students. Because remember, the Constitution talks about quality education. Not only education, it talks about quality education. So we expect that a child who is in Turkana, a child who is in Nairobi, a child who is in Meru, to have the same equipment, to have the same infrastructure, so that when you come to rate or to rank these students, you rank them without discriminating against the other who was learning under the tree.
Samantha, maybe I can also get to say something shortly about it. Is that I wonder how far these COVID rules are being observed in school.
Of course,
The other day, my niece told me that because, you know, so many schools have been closed, like private schools and all that. There is a private school. And I think they were around 51. Now they're around 62 in the same class. So then I want to ask myself, are we really sure about what you're saying? And even beyond the problem with social distancing, of course there's no social distancing there. But then you need to ask yourself, one teacher was serving how many students before that? Then now, a teacher who is already stressed because they are chased by time to cover the entire curriculum, they also have more students to serve. For sure, what can we say about the quality of education in this country? What can we really do? Because we need to do something. There is a generation here that is going to finish school without getting to, with around 50%, having understood 50% the things they should have understood in that particular segment of language. So there is actually a problem. There is a problem.
And I think, Judy, now that you've mentioned that, I think a major concern would be the issue of the curriculum-based curriculum, the competence-based curriculum. So you think, what I think in terms of this is that you see that our learners need to do practice. And it's not just the theoretical learning that was there before. And you find that now that we have COVID, and this teacher needs to attend to each of these pupils or students during the learning setup. We also have to ensure that they have the right equipment. Do they have this equipment? If they need to divide themselves into groups of 15, are they having the right setup when they are going to these particular classrooms to ensure that even what we are talking about in terms of CBC is not worse than what we had before with 844? Because you tell me I'm supposed to teach a student to learn music. For example, there is no piano in the class, there is no guitar. And now with COVID, probably now if we had only one guitar, they all have to queue for different sessions to learn. I think this is a particular key gap that we are having in our institutions. And it might actually lead us not actually reaping the fruits that we foresaw in terms of CBC.
And I feel like this whole infrastructure challenge, it moves beyond just there being infrastructure or not, to aspects of widening inequality. Because already the education sector had significant disparities in access. We had people in areas like Turkana, Samburu, Garissa, exhibiting significantly lower education outcomes. So there's the regional disparity aspect. But now if you go into the aspect of, should I say class, social class, there are those who are in probably well-established private schools, those who are going through the IGCSE system of education. To be honest, their learning was not disrupted. And now even post all those like stay-at-home rules and whatever, their learning is still not disrupted. So we're going to have a group of people who will transition into university, probably before their peers, because our Form 4s last year are now completing this year. So I think the infrastructure challenge is something that definitely needs to be addressed. I feel like it's an extremely pertinent issue. But then just moving on to that, when CS Magoha announced that now our students are going back to school, he basically gave parents about a week to prepare, told them, by the way, your children are going back on Monday. So now you've moved your family to Kitale, your child was going to school in Nairobi. You start asking yourself, now how am I going to ship this kid back? So there's that aspect, but initially there was also uproar by teachers. Because they were like, first of all, even pre-COVID, especially secondary school teachers, even pre-COVID, we were having problems fitting these children in school. They didn't have dorms. They didn't have adequate toilets. So then how are we bringing these kids back? So I guess like now a pertinent issue with regard to that is, did the government actually do enough in terms of preparing the parents, first of all, and also preparing the teachers in that regard?
Well, I think to some extent we must appreciate that there were some attempts to prepare the parents, especially that the students needed to go back to school. And these attempts were even seen from the media, whereby we had our Ministry of Education on a regular basis announcing that they are actually preparing to reopen the schools. What was not clear is when. And I think when the schools reopened, the first time, that's the phased reopening of schools, the grade 4s and grade 8s, it came by a surprise, by the way. And it's only that maybe a parent was lucky if you only had one kid in school. Assuming that happened, 4 kids. What were you supposed to do, especially in terms of school fees? And at that particular time, people are even more scared of COVID. You are worried, will be my kid safe at school while they go to school, maybe even if it's class 4 or grade 8, whichever the case. So that was a concern then. Then come January, when we were told that now all these schools must reopen at the same time. Now it came as a huge economic shock in terms of now I have school fees, I'm a parent. I have to pay for my kid in high school, for my kid in university, my kid in primary school. And again, people had lost incomes. We must even acknowledge that many people had lost their jobs. Many people even who are doing business had lost incomes. So you find that this public outcry was not just because people are worried of getting COVID. It's because even parents were worried about, are they able to afford these school fees? I think that would be a quick insight into the matter.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, they at a point said that you should go and report to your local chief if your children are sent home from school. But I mean, I don't know how effective that would be because, like, again, while the government says that education is free, I think we all know that it is not entirely free. And I think that's one thing that the government needs to be extremely clear with people about. There's a certain capitation issued for each student, but it doesn't cover things like transport. It doesn't cover things like uniform. It doesn't cover, I mean, there's so many things that that capitation doesn't cover. For those who are in boarding schools, it doesn't cover boarding fees. It doesn't cover a lot of things, which is, in fact, with those in boarding schools, the bulk of the expense is actually not tuition. It's all those other things around the tuition fee. So
Actually,
yeah.
Samantha, as much I would agree that yes, the parents were prepared socially. Yes. What do you mean socially? Psychologically, yes. They do, yes. We heard the minister saying that the schools are opening. Yeah, they are prepared psychologically, but economically, financially, they were not. Why? Because these are the parents who had closed the businesses. Remember, there was a lockdown. These are the parents who had lost jobs. So, as far as I'm concerned, these parents were stressed in a way. Again, remember, there's some private schools which have closed. They've been converted into residential areas. Yes.
And even business centers.
People are renting them as houses.
So we have a parent who has been told, yes, take your kid to school. And when the parent report, it finds us.
And another one is being told
So actually, apart from the minister saying that students should report to school, you ought not to have given an alternative to the schools which have been closed down. What happens? We need a policy. We need the government to come up now and know how they accommodate these students and these people who have been chased from the private schools.
But Bonnie, there's something I think we can appreciate is that, even this opening of schools, at some point it was to be done. And we all knew we needed to open our schools. Because even looking at the scenario right now, is COVID going anywhere? I don't know what to say, but it just tells us that it's probably something we could even have done early if we had the right planning and the right infrastructure in place. And does it mean that had we stayed, let's say even up to May, would things even be different?
Because if you ask me, I don't think anything really has changed. Because the infrastructure is still not there. People are learning under trees. If it's masks they're giving, guys, they should have given them at first time. But I was even looking at a list. I saw it online, I think, of things that now the students are supposed to bring to school. So now all these PPEs have been lumped on the parents' bill. The government is not taking, in some institutions, I know, like in some counties, the county governments are giving like masks and stuff like that to their citizens. But for the most part, that is being lumped on the parents' bill. So anyway, I think...
And actually, before you move on, Samantha, it's good to mention that this COVID-19 will have great effect on the enrollment rates.
Yeah, of course.
And the transition rate that we've been talking about. So, if we hand from the news, already the government is concerned that quite a number of students and pupils have not reported back to school. So that really tells you that the COVID has greatly affected the education sector.
So I just want to swiftly move past that point, but I just still want to stay on this conversation of preparedness. Teachers. Because now, teachers I don't know, first of all, they were already, with CBC, they were struggling, to be honest. They were already struggling in that regard. And now the teacher-pupil ratio has now significantly changed because we were bragging, actually, that we have attained the 1 to 40 standard, but now it's 1 to 15. So then, I think my next question is then, were teachers prepared to handle these students?
Well, I think the teachers were not prepared, especially in matters handling COVID-19 cases. And this comes whereby we find that there was, of course, public knowledge on what you should do in regard to COVID-19 in case you have a COVID-19 patient at home, how you even respond to it. This was available in the public media. But when it comes to teachers, I don't think they had any particular session that they were taken for some training to be told that now in school, when you have this particular case of COVID-19, how do you address it, be it a teacher, be it a pupil? The teachers also, when we were opening the schools, they were being given thermogans. Some don't even know how to use the thermogun. And they are expected to use it to test the pupils as they are coming to school. At one point, I think we even saw a teacher asking a fellow teacher, now what does this temperature mean? So that is a concern.
Yeah.
It means that the teachers were not well
No, but
prepared.
have you ever gone to those supermarkets where the guy PMAs you and tells you your temperature is 28.5?
And you wonder if you are still alive.
So now I really want to plug in that issue because, and my bias obviously because I'm coming from the university, it's the preparedness of university lecturers towards coming back to school and doing the blended learning. So first of all, we have lecturers who are using their own personal laptops to do what? To teach. Okay? Then we have the other category of those lecturers who don't even have a laptop.
Yeah.
And we have the others who have the laptop, but yet they can't know even how to hold classroom via Zoom or Musomi or whichever. Yes, I understand they underwent some training and all that, but still they are facing challenges because it was a rushed thing. So I'll tell you for sure they were not fully prepared. But then even keeping students at home would not have made them more prepared. What would have actually happened is starting to prep these teachers early now. If CS Magoa says we are going back to school like in 2 months' time, obviously we have now longer time to prepare teachers, even psychologically, because I've seen a lecturer teaching mathematics online and it's stressful. Like it's hard even to get to handle that. So you find that half of the time they offer sort of half-baked information because they don't even know how to do it. Apart from the torture of trying to, I mean, even if it was, or is it? Yeah. So
Can you hear me? Can you hear me Zoom?
But then Judy, yesterday I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's taking a PhD, and I think she was telling me that some of the maths lessons and lessons.
Yes, continue. Dennis.
Yeah, some of the maths. Yesterday I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues who's doing a PhD, and some of the lessons are mathematical in nature, and she was telling me that doing assignments is a tall order altogether. Because how do you even show your colleague how to calculate? Somebody is in another county or another country, you are all sitting in with the professor to learn. So you find that even at the university level, doing online classes is not that effective. And maybe for theoretical classes, maybe it can work. But when it comes to practical classes and classes that require a lot of practice like mathematics, then probably we still need now back to blended and see how we can have some lessons delivered face-to-face teaching and others can still be online.
But you see, on that one, I would say that lecturers cannot take excuse that they cannot teach online. You see, change is the only constant thing.
Okay, so so there's someone I was talking to, and they were basically telling me they actually went and saw a professional, and they basically went to see this professional to confide in them over certain things that they were facing, and the professional told them, "You are too." Because, generally, guys don't take mental health seriously. So I think, just generally as a nation, we might need to start taking that issue of mental health a bit more seriously. Yeah.
Actually, before we close, the main issue from you've seen the students are burning the schools. They are stabbing the teachers. This one I could relate it to pressure. Because with COVID-19 rules, they are not allowed to play. Remember, these are young people who are growing and they have a lot of energy. So if that energy is kept inside them, you see now that what is exploding in terms of strikes, burning the schools. So I don't know how we can come up with some guidelines how these students can participate in games. Because remember, these students were participating like in the music festivals, in the dramas, in the football, netball, and all of a sudden they are put in charge. You see that pressure? So I can relate it to the strikes and what you see in schools.
And
not forgetting teachers. Not forgetting
teachers.
Very
true.
Because
they need that time apart.
They're under pressure to cover like the entire calendar for a whole year in 3 months.
Yes, of course. So I think with that, I just want to hear your parting shots. And because this episode was basically meant to bring out what has been done with regard to the education sector, considering all the things that have happened around COVID, and whether whatever has been implemented was effective or not. And I think we've tried at least to cover particular aspects of that. We weren't able to cover the entire document, of course. But like, I'd just like to hear your parting shots and what you would want the audience to know then moving forward.
So basically, the government has tried in terms of infrastructure, but we say more need to be done because we can't allow children to keep on studying under the trees and the like. So it can improve on the internet connectivity, electricity supply, as well as the classroom construction and desk supply.
Yeah, so far we know that we can't predict crisis. Could have been corona, next tomorrow it could be climate change, which does not have a vaccine. So then, for sure, blended learning has to be here, and blended learning is the future of learning in this country. So possibly we need to reimagine and innovate ways in which we can ensure our children can get quality education through blended learning.
Well, I think actually we must appreciate the efforts done by the government in terms of ensuring our kids go back to school. And while appreciating that, we have our teachers who are not enough. And given that the current budget allocated money to employ at least 10,000 intern teachers and 5,000 teachers, it's the high time this is implemented, because we are already into February and we'll be almost in June at the end of the financial year. So if this is implemented, it could actually help solve the issue around the preparedness of teachers and also them being enough to deliver the content.
Yeah, and I think that for me, a take home from this episode is the conversation is still sustainability. And for the education sector in Kenya to thrive, it must be inclusive. And it's one of those sectors that have great potential to create serious inequality gaps. I think from a social sector perspective, we like to say that education is a prerequisite to employment. So if we mess up at this point, we basically risk the possibility of sending these children into years and years of disadvantage. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us for episode 4 of 254 Youth Policy Cafe. I'd like to also inform you that we on occasion undertake some mentorship activities, and one thing that's coming is the Job Search Toolkit webinar, and we'll be briefing you on our various platforms. And so definitely subscribe to our channel, follow us on the various social media platforms, and we're 254 Youth Policy Cafe across board. So subscribe, and join us for the next episode.